is beautiful, there's so much hope. Even in the darkest of times, there's radiating light. Live each moment fully and completely, and dance to the music of the lush green earth.
Oh yeah. Right. Hello guys. How are you all doing? So welcome the lovely Fee.
Hi guys.
And Fee was actually on my channel before when we did the American candy tasting, but I deleted that video when I wasn't very well. So she's back. So we're going to be talking about late diagnoses today. And we're just going to discuss the points that we've got on this little piece of paper right here. And it's quite a long list, so instead of breaking it up the way I usually would, we're just going to go through the points and do it as a flowing video. So that's the plan. So, late diagnoses in females.
Well, my take on it is that females, we are certainly, well, from my own experience, we are later to be diagnosed because we tend to mask our emotions, and it makes it harder for the professional people to detect it and diagnose it. And yeah, generally speaking, it is diagnosed later in females because we're harder to spot the characteristics.
Yeah, absolutely. And it is more complicated in females.
Yeah.
Because we tend to compensate more.
Yeah, that's true.
In social interactions.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, that's kind of why it's more complex in our gender.
Yeah, I think so. And also, we tend to do things that would kind of blend in with society, and that also is a way of them being able to kind of disguise it a bit, so that the professional people find, like, that's why they diagnose it a bit later.
Definitely. And late diagnoses in males, what do we think?
Well, I think that is they still get diagnosed before females because it's a bit easier to spot in a male, simply because of the behaviours and characteristics of the condition. They present them a bit better. For us, they really have to kind of dig deep and see what the bigger picture is.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a really good way of putting it.
Yeah.
Really good way of putting it. I think that it's, well, what Fiona's trying to say is that it's more complicated diagnosing a female in comparison to diagnosing males, because males don't tend to mask as much and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
Okay, how do we both feel as late diagnosed females?
You first.
Yeah, okay. Well, I feel like it should have been sort of picked up on sooner than it was.
Yeah.
At school, I think, is when they should have picked up on it. But as we've talked about, it is a little bit more difficult to pick up on it in females.
Mm-hmm.
So that's probably why it wasn't. But there were several opportunities back at school for them to pick up on it, and they never did.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, I feel in a way not slighted, but definitely a little bit miffed, perhaps, that they didn't notice.
Mm-hmm. I agree with you, because certainly when I was at school as well, it was I had difficulties and stuff, and I just maybe thought I wasn't particularly good at a subject. I didn't realise it was more to it, and I feel that I should have maybe been diagnosed a bit sooner, because it wasn't until I questioned the word learning difficulty and got the support from those who shall remain nameless, that I began my journey from being diagnosed, and as I say, it was like somebody switching on a light switch when at diagnosis. But I think that should have happened like years before. It should have happened perhaps in my teenage years, but sadly it didn't. I mean, when I was at primary school, I got some support, like they called it computer skills.
Yeah.
And also I went to OT, and she helped with my motor skills.
Okay.
And things like that. But at high school, I was just left to get on with it. I didn't get any support.
No, me neither.
Whatsoever.
Neither.
So it's really then I think a diagnosis would have been helpful.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So it should have been a wee bit earlier than when it was. But
yeah.
At least long and the short of it, at least we got a diagnosis in the end.
Better late than never.
Yeah, that's true.
How do we compare as females to males who are late diagnosed?
Well, I guess that comparing them would be probably, I guess there's just a sense of sort of frustration and not knowing what it is that we've got.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a comparison. That's what both parties would feel.
Yeah.
I guess, but on the opposite side of the coin, I guess that it might be a late diagnosis in males, but they still, I think, get diagnosed a lot earlier.
Yeah, they do.
Because their behaviours are easier to diagnose.
They're easier to spot.
Yeah.
Do we think there needs to be an improvement in early detection? Yes, I do.
Yeah, I agree with you. Yeah, because either in education or symptoms like in health as well, there needs to be some clarity and some sort of if it was detected at school, then certainly that would be a starting point, because at least the teachers looking after the kids would be able to spot like the early signs.
Yeah.
So I'd say probably from about primary school there should be like doing a sort of a test. I mean, when I was at uni, they put me through an educational psychologist.
Yeah.
And I think they didn't diagnose it though. They only gave me an IQ. But I think something like that at primary school, or a specialist should work along with the pupils to diagnose it earlier. If that makes sense.
That makes perfect sense. I was wondering, an extra wee question.
Uh-huh.
I was wondering, do you think that people who are male that are diagnosed late are perhaps more female typical in how they present?
I think so because the ones that are diagnosed later tend to have the same characteristics as we do.
Yeah.
Yeah,
like they're more vocal.
Yeah.
And
yeah,
find it easier to talk to people and socialise
and also just when you're around the table with people, it's easier to kind of say, for instance, what I do is I pick up a glass of juice and I start drinking it and start doing what other people around the table are doing.
More emotional, perhaps.
Yeah. And I think the people, the males that are diagnosed later must have some sort of chromosome or gene. Carry on.
Okay. So the last question is, why do you think females slip through the net?
Well, it's interestingly enough, it's like the way I see like diagnosis stuff is like it's like a big fishing net.
Mm-hmm.
Some wee fish get in the net and get diagnosed. Other wee fish get out and don't get the diagnosis or have to wait. And that's what's kind of I think people that slip through the net are the ones that get diagnosed later on.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think there should be more. I think there should be that shouldn't be allowed to happen. There should be, if you're in the net, you should get your diagnosis.
Masking, I think, is the big reason why, because we tend to mask and, as we said earlier on, compensate more
Yeah, absolutely.
to fit in socially.
That's what I meant about sitting around the table and drinking my juice, do what other people do.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So, yeah, I hope that was interesting for some of you guys. And please be nice in the comments and kind to each other. And speak to you again soon. Okay, bye.
Bye.
Live each moment fully and completely, and dance to the music of the lush green earth.
Oh.